Welcome, Mom. I am so honored that you are spending your time with us today. And if you are new to the podcast, welcome. We are just blessed to have you with us today. And if you are a returning listener or fan, we so appreciate you as well. And we are so glad that you're back here with us in 2022. Today, you are listening to episode 95, How You Can Afford to Remediate Your Dyslexic Child. And for those of you who are new on this road to remediation and this journey and really planning out the next steps for your child, well, there's great news. One is you are now in an amazing community of dyslexic parents and educators who are passionate about what they are doing and helping and serving in our community. And unlike many differences that our children experience, dyslexia is a learning difference that can be remediated. Let me say that again. Dyslexia can be remediated. However, please keep in mind that there is no cure for dyslexia. So you or your child will always be dyslexic, may always struggle with certain parts of reading and writing. But the sooner we can identify our children with dyslexia, the sooner we can intervene and provide them the appropriate instruction and practices and teach them the mechanics of reading. And when we teach them the rules of reading, they are better equipped to read, to be able to pick words apart and sounds apart and be able to be successful and feel comfortable and be able to move forward to shift from learning to read to reading to learn and support them throughout their education and in their careers going forward as adults. And so it all starts at the very beginning. The sooner and the earlier we can identify our children and begin that remediation process, the better. But we know the reality is that most children with dyslexia are caught between third, seventh grade, kind of a window of time there. Usually third grade about there because that's when we start the testing in public schools and we start seeing those reading gaps. But we all know that, especially in our family, we saw signs of dyslexia even in pre-K. We just didn't have it on our radar. So you are here now. You're obviously listening today because you have a dyslexic learner in your family, and you're going to be on an amazing journey with them. But what I do want to talk about today is, I realize that there is this, this gap of information that I see out there, and why we have this remediation piece, there's no way to sugarcoat that it is hard. It is a journey that, you can even think about it in the way of taking a trip. When we think about planning for a large family trip, then we think about all the pieces, especially for moms, right? Especially when I think about, some of the bigger trips we've done, and some of my favorite trips have been to Disney and Disney cruise and things like that. And I'm very type A. If you don't know that already, then I've just given you that disclaimer. I'm very type A. I'm a planner. I feel better when I plan things out. And when I do, if I'm planning like a Disney trip, I'm down to day one. We're going to this park. Here's the outfit. Here's the coordinating whatevers. Now, as my daughter's getting older, I'm a little bit more lax about that. But in early years, I just wanted, and of course, not only that, but you've got to plan where you're staying. You can't just show up at the airport and jump on a plane, especially not nowadays. It might not be even, the flight might not even be going through at that point. So Let's step back for a second. So when you think about planning a vacation, you have to think about what is your location, right? You have to think about where is it that you want to go. And maybe you do this on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, or maybe you're blessed enough to travel monthly. So if that's the case and you're thinking about even for a work trip, but I'm thinking specifically as a family trip, as a mom, a lot of times we're the ones planning those trips. I mean, not always, but the majority of time. And so when I think about those trips, you have to think about first is where is our destination? Where do we want to end up at? Where do we want to go? What experiences do we want to have? Where are we going to stay? are we going to have locations where we can get to food or activities, or, are we going to need to rent a car? Is there going to be transportation available to us? Like all these questions. Again, hand raised, huge Disney fan. If you're not, I apologize, but I'm a huge Disney fan. So I love to stay on Disney properties because I can just hop on their transportation and go, get food, or I can hop and go to the different parks. And literally I can park my car, or I can fly in and get a shuttle to the Disney resorts, and then I never have to worry about transportation again. So I absolutely love that. And then you're immersed in the whole culture of Disney, which some people might not like that. Again, I'm a huge Disney fan, and so I love being immersed in all that. But when you think about planning a trip and you think about all the pieces that go into that, I want to ask you a question. Are you putting as much time and effort into thinking through how to remediate dyslexia? Or I heard one time I guess it was a presentation. It was like a webinar I was in. I heard one time a lady say, I know, it was in a Facebook group. It was one of those, instead of doing like a podcast, it was like a Facebook or Instagram like interview. And I never forget, this lady was actually an educator as well. And she said, well, I just dropped my kid off at school and it's their responsibility to educate them. Okay. So let me go on a little tangent for a second. Absolutely. I'm a civil rights attorney and I work in education, and yes, absolutely I get them and know them very well, the federal regulations and laws as it relates to public education. Absolutely get that. But I also even more passionately get that I'm a parent, I'm a mother, and I'm a leader in my family, and it is absolutely my responsibility to, one, make sure she is identified as to what she needs, what type of learner, what type of profile she has as a learner, so that I can best help her and support her at home. But I'm not going to just leave it to chance. And so why would we leave our child's education to chance when we plan these trips? I mean, you go to Hawaii for Thanksgiving every year. Maybe you go to Europe. I don't know. Maybe you go up north to visit family every year, and you have to choose or think about, especially during COVID times, right? You have to think about, where can I stop this open, things like that. We're putting so much energy into those things, and that's not bad. Like, I love planning vacations. I can't wait till we can plan some that are on our bucket list. But what I'm saying is, we plan all these things. There's all these steps to the destination. But have you really thought through the remediation of your child's reading? Maybe their writing, maybe their math, or where are their weaknesses? Have you really thought through, what's the destination? Where do you want your child to end up? Are they 2 years behind on grade level reading? Are they struggling with anxiety and they need counseling? What is the end goal? And so, to me, if you're listening and you're here with us today, your end goal is, very similar to most of us that are here, on this journey, which is, we want our children to be successful, functioning, productive adults. We want them to have, goals in life. We want them to be happy. We want them to be able to, give back to their community. To be able to do all those things, to be able to have real, social, emotional health, and to be able to live independently and to be happy and to do these things that we want them to be able to do, to be able to really, what's what I'm looking for them to really go after their dreams, to really go after those pursuits of what lights them up, what are their strengths. And so for us just to drop our kids off and just hope they get it, that's just not enough. Our teachers, unfortunately, are not trained at the level of training that they need to be trained at to be able to successfully remediate our children, nor do they have time for small groups that are really independent one-on-one groups. Your children may be getting some type of accommodation, but they're in a classroom with other students with other learning differences. So, when you think about that, then one of the things that may come to mind is, okay, I have been, I'm on this new parenting journey, and I recognize that there are pieces that I can do for my child to be successful, things that I need to make sure are in place. That's not a bad thing. Like, you're here because you want to do better. You're here, well, I won't say do better. You're here because maybe so, but you're here because you want to learn how to best help your child. So, what's the difference? What's the difference in looking at a public school education and then looking at what else can we either layer on top and provide additional supports for your child, or where do we need to look at remediation within a school day and how that looks? Regardless to which vacation path you take, you will most likely have to pay for those tutors, summer remediation. You may have to pay for counseling. You may have to pay for speech therapy above and beyond what the schools are doing. And for some of us, we've even elected to pay for private schooling. So I say all that to say, I see many times, I see and I hear many times people say or make a statement of, I want to hear from someone in a public school. I don't understand how people afford a private school, let alone a private dyslexia school. But you have to figure out what is the cost. What is the cost of educating your child? And I know for some, this is a hot topic. I get that, ideally we all have the access to public education. I get that. But we have to also peel back the layers and decide what's best for our own unique dyslexic child. So I will tell you definitely it was not, first of all, I think I've shared even in this episode, or maybe it was the last one, we didn't have on our radar that our daughter might be dyslexic, and we definitely did not have in the kind of the family plan, if you will, or the outlook for our family or our plans for our future was going to include paying almost $25,000 a year for a private dyslexia school. But we also didn't know what we didn't know. We found out along our journey that although we had amazing teachers, there was only so much they knew. And some of the last teachers we had in first grade and our reading specialists, they were like, we've done all we can do here. And so we had to make a decision as a family. Do we want to layer on top every afternoon and evening Orton Gillingham tutoring in addition to the speech we were doing privately? Did we want, as a first grade, second grader, for that to be every night and not always aligning with what was being taught during the day? Or now that our eyes were open to another way of schooling, and we live in Atlanta, so we have an option of many private schools, some with dyslexia programs, some with private dyslexia schools. And I get that's not available to everyone, but it could be. So let's keep thinking about how you can afford to remediate your dyslexic child. So it wasn't something we had on our radar. It was definitely not something we planned on. I mean, to be honest, I don't even think I thought about we're going to pay $25,000 a year for college. So to say it was a little bit of a sticker shock to find out we were going to need to pay $25,000 for second grade was more than we had really planned for. But when we started learning, and like I said, learning what we didn't know, we realized that was the only decision we could make. So where every teacher is trained in Orton Gillingham, every child in the building is dyslexic. Everything is centered around the gifts and the amazing things that dyslexics do and the different ways they think and learn. We were also and continue to be surrounded by amazing students who all have their own dyslexic pieces that we're learning about. So as I talk about learning expenses, I want you to go back and listen to episode 85. 85 was 3 ways you can save money on educational expenses. And I talked about ways that you can get breaks from your taxes on specific pieces to educational expenses, especially if your child does attend a school like our daughter does, where you might be eligible for some specific medical expenses. But go back to episode 85, because we're not going to talk about that today. What I do want to talk about is what I promised, how you can afford to remediate your dyslexic child. So the first thing you're going to need to do is, like we talked about in the last episode, you are going to need to keep that psychoeducational evaluation handy. you need to dig back in there, if you don't recall from your meetings, and figure out what are the services they're recommending. So write all those down. Maybe it's occupational therapy. Maybe it's speech. Maybe it's that you need, specific instruction for math or reading or both. Write down what that specific instruction is. And then talking, through it with your group, whether that's an IEP, a 504 plan or committee, or if it's privately, that you're working with with just a private psychologist, you're looking at what the services are that they recommend to help remediate and accommodate where the remediation is not available, of looking at your child's learning profile. So when you think about remediation for dyslexia, you have to work backwards. You have to look at the beginning, what is it that they're recommending? And then go back. If at your school, let's say, for example, it could even be, it could be public or private. Maybe they say, yes, we do have some accommodations. We don't really remediate here, but we can put them in a small group setting where the student can take extended time for tests and things like that. That's great, but that's down the road. Do not settle for accommodations at the beginning. Absolutely, you may need them going forward. Some dyslexics get remediated and don't need them. Others do, depending on what the other dyslexia sisters look like. And if you don't know what those are, I want you to go back and find the Dyslexic Sisters episode and listen. So when you look at those pieces, though, then you can work backwards. So if it is that your child is dyslexic, and obviously you wouldn't be here, right, if not, and you're trying to work backwards, then you have to figure out what remediation do they need. And if they're saying, if your school says we can provide accommodations, and that's kind of where we are, and then we can have someone one-on-one work with your child to read aloud or whatever. Like I said, that is not enough. So if your school cannot provide remediation, which is some type of reading remediation for your dyslexic, then you need to look outside of that. And if they do have it inside, what does it look like? Is it 2 students, 3 students, or is it 15 students? And are all those students dyslexic? Or do you have other learning profiles in the room where maybe there are a multitude of differences? If that's the case, then is the teacher, when she's teaching reading, is she using programs that are scientifically based to remediate a dyslexic? Because just teaching phonics is not enough. It has to be taught in a systematic way. And I will link in the show notes at dyslexiamomlife.com/episode 95, a link to, I think it's the International Dyslexia Association. They have several really good resources, but they have a specific resource on reading instruction. It's like a 1 or 2 page PDF. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. So if you're trying to figure out, is your current school or the school your child will be going to, or is there instruction at the level your child needs to be remediated, that will help you kind of dig into the terminology of that and how to ask questions around that. Because this particular episode is not about that. This particular episode is how to help get you some money to pay for that. But I want to talk a little bit about identifying what you need before you know how to pay for it. So when you think about talking and having those conversations, you have to figure out, does the school have the pieces to remediate or not? And then if they don't, you have to figure out, okay, so am I going to go the route of private tutoring? That's fine. Or are you going to go, or maybe you're going to look at private schools to see if they have private programs. Sometimes they'll have it's like a program within a school, but it will be a dyslexia program. So unlike what I described a few minutes ago, it will be a program where every child is dyslexic, probably with something else, another dyslexic sister with that. But every child in the group has been identified dyslexic, and they're all being taught to read. And so that's kind of a different type of programming than a program that's more to learning differences, like a larger larger array of differences, looking at different, let's say, maybe different language-based differences, or even maybe Asperger's or some other pieces or some other behavioral concerns and things of that nature. So, but what you're going to want to look for is, one, is there any kind of programming at my current school that's specifically for dyslexics, not just for a child they've labeled as special ed? Is there specific dyslexia remediation at the school, right? Like, that's a very direct question. If not, then you have to then look at what schools are available that will have a dyslexia program, or what dyslexia schools are in your neighborhood or in your city or state. We moved, oh gosh, I don't know, it was 70 miles maybe? I don't know exactly. It's been a couple years. We moved, I changed jobs just to be in North Atlanta where all the schools were at. There weren't schools where we were. There was public schools, but there weren't any private dyslexic schools. So we moved across town. And we were able to do that. That was a commitment we made. We have one child, and that's the decision we made, and we don't regret that. That was best for our family. But I give that to you just as an example. I've met people through the podcast that have relocated to Atlanta for 2 years to go to a specific school and then went right back home. So there's different ways you can remediate. And I invite you, if you're stuck or you need conversation, follow our Facebook group. I have a Dyslexia Mom Life podcast community. You can ask to be a part of that. It's a free Facebook community, and people that are, fans of the show are in there having conversations. You can send me a DM on my Instagram page, which is just Dyslexia Mom Life. And you can also email me if you have questions. Email me, and we can kind of brainstorm together at Nicole@dyslexiamomlife.com. The things I just gave you, all those resources, I check those myself. My team doesn't check those. I check those. So if you need anything, you can reach out to me that way. But the Facebook group, I know in the last episode I was probably sounding pretty negative about Facebook groups. That was not my intention, other than if you're overwhelmed, take a pause. But be selective of where you spend your time, right? Where you give people your time. And so come to our Facebook group. You can ask the questions that you want to ask about remediation. You can ask and brainstorm with people. If you want to get in touch with me directly, though, that's best probably through Instagram or the email, and I can have a direct private conversation with you. So when you think about going back to what we were just talking about as far as selecting, before you know if you can afford something, you have to kind of figure out what your options are. When we attended a parent meeting at our daughter's school that was more of a community after-school event for parents to learn more about dyslexia, we knew when we walked into the school that we were like, we have got to figure out a way to make this work. So I say all that to say, don't lose hope. Let me tell you how you can afford this. And I know you're probably like, okay, I'm waiting. What's taking so long? But I needed to give you a little bit of background before we jump right into how you can afford it. So once you first know what your child needs through that psychological, through having conversations with the educators and the people in your tribe to make some decisions about what is needed for your child, and you decide how that service is going to look. Are you going to completely leave the services during the school day? Are you going to have to layer on counseling services or remediation services after school? Are you going to have to pay for a special program within a school or a private school, a dyslexia immersion school? Like, what is it going to look like? And maybe you lay out all those options, right? Like maybe you have several options like we had, and then you kind of work backwards. But once you do that, and we quickly narrowed in on the schools we felt like were a good fit for our family, then you work backwards. You figure out, so let's say, for example, the $25,000. How do you work backwards to afford that? So there's a couple things I want you to look at that are not unique to your situation. One is, talk to the schools that are dyslexia schools. Talk to the schools that are private schools with dyslexia programming. Let them look at your child's psychological. Let them give you some feedback. They will absolutely do that for you. And then if you find a school that you feel like is a good fit and it's feasible for your family and it's within your bandwidth of travel or whatever you're willing to do to get your child to the school, then you can look at what scholarships does that school provide, because schools always have some type of scholarship, especially if it's a need-based scholarship. There's a school in Atlanta that's over $30,000 a year. Yep, $30,000 a year. So if you had not already planned as a family to spend that type of money on private schools in general, then you may be looking for other sources to help your child be able to get access to that type of education. Now, if your child, obviously through the private pieces, you have to get accepted and those types of things. But even through, we'll talk a minute about private tutoring. But as you think about school options, you can look at scholarships that the school provides. You can also go to your state Department of Education. So, for example, we're in Georgia. You could type in Georgia State Department of Education, or you can put in Georgia DOE in the search, and then once you get to the state DOE page, there's always a search engine in there somewhere. You type in Special Education Scholarship. If nothing comes up that way, type in private school and see what pops up. Many times your schools may have vouchers. They may, depending on your states, you may have access. Like in Georgia, we have a special needs scholarship. There are specific rules around that as far as the attendance in public school. We didn't qualify for the one in Georgia, but we'd always been private. So there's very specific parameters to qualify in Georgia. But you could have some monies there. Like there are students at our school that get thousands of dollars from Georgia State Department of Education because they were enrolled in public school, then enrolled in a private school, and because their child was identified with dyslexia, they're able to apply for a special needs, I think is what they call it here, a special needs scholarship, and the student is eligible. It's different levels of eligibility in the states, and it depends on a lot of different factors. So I can't really go into all of those today. So you could layer that, though, what you get from the state, layer that with the individual school scholarship, and you could be looking at something more manageable. And for most private schools, you can pay it at one time, or you can pay it quarterly, or we pay it monthly some years. So it just kind of depends on. And so let's say, you were able to get, let's say $5,000 from the state and $10,000. Let's say you had a $25,000 tuition, and you received $5,000 from the state DOE, and then you received $10,000 from the school itself for a scholarship. That left $10,000 you had to pay. $10,000 for a $25,000 education. And then you could divide that out monthly if you wanted to. Now, you may be saying, well, how do I come up with an extra $1,000? Like, if I could come up with an extra $1,000 a month, I'd be doing something different. I get you. I hear it. I do. I absolutely do. But, I don't know. For us, there wasn't a question of if. It was a question of how. And so some of the things that so I gave you that example of $25,000 in those pieces so that you could, now if you were to work backwards, you would know, okay, now I've got $8,000 I've got to come up with, or $6,000 or $5,000. Maybe it's that you're wanting to look at, so then maybe you compare that to, I know a friend of mine did this. She compared that to private tutoring and X amount of days a week, also doing the tutoring. A lot of us do the remediation in the summer too, because we're trying to catch them up, and we can't have those lagging months. We need them to stay on track. So many of us do stuff in the summer, some type of remediation, even if we're doing it ourselves. And so even through the piece of tutoring, the reality is trained dyslexia tutors, it's expensive because they go through extensive training to become a tutor or reading specialist, and many of them it takes many years and many years of observations and schools, and so that specialized skill comes at a cost, but that cost benefits your child. So you have to think about that, and you have to work backwards. So maybe it is that you're looking at $5,000 for tutoring, like for the year, or $10,000, or whatever it is. It depends on how often your child's going and where you live, as what's the hourly rate is, and things like that. But you can do the same thing. Let's say you go to a tutor and she's like, well, I think you need to come based on your psychological, your child needs to come 3 times a week or 4 times a week, and this is how much I charge an hour. You can add that up, and then you say, well, what is the average, looking at the severity of the dyslexia, and the person may say 2 years. Or for us, I had a friend recently said that their psychologist told them at the time of the evaluation, it's going to take you 2 years. This is what you need to do. And then they just had to go find the person, right, to do that. So you're going to work backwards. Once you know how much money you need, maybe it's a 2-year commitment, and you know that in 2 years at a private school, you pay X amount of dollars, or 3 years with a private tutor, or you need 6 months of anxiety counseling for your child, whatever it is. Figure that out and then work backwards. So how do I do that? How do I come up with this extra money? So there's many ways like this. You can start a podcast. You can start a blog. There's many ways to monetize those pieces. You could start an Etsy shop. Recently, I took a class with a friend on how to make hand-knit chunky blankets. Now, I'm not crafty at all. Creative, yes. Crafty, no. But I have made several blankets since then. And when I went on to Etsy shop owners were selling that blanket for $100 a piece. So if I wanted to start an Etsy shop and sell blankets, which I don't, I've got several Etsy shops, but they're not blanket shops. But if I wanted to do that, I could, sit with my family. I could do that at night, and then I could package them up and I could mail them out. If you have, something that you've been wanting to do or create, you could create some type of shop for that. If you wanted to write a book, if you want to teach people how to cook, any of those things. But maybe you don't want to start a business. Maybe you want to go work for someone part-time to be a copywriter. You can do that at home. Maybe working from home, you want to be a virtual assistant. Maybe you don't even want to go that route. Maybe you want to figure out, how do I get a low-interest home equity loan? Or maybe you can go, like many of us have access to our employer's retirement account loans that are low interest. So there are some pieces that you can put in place where you have to get creative. And some of us have gotten really creative. Now, not everybody has to do that, right? But if you're still listening to this particular episode, it's because you're trying to figure out some way to give your child an opportunity for a different type of remediation than what possibly your current school can offer. You can do it. You just have to figure out, like I said, the pieces and the strategy and the action steps is figuring out from that psychological what it is that your child needs for services. How is the length of that look? How long does that need to happen? And then figuring out in your local community, how does that look? Is it within the schools? Is it I'm paying for additional tutoring? Am I paying for just a summer dyslexic program? Some people do that. They just go off for the summer to a dyslexic summer camp. Whatever it is you decide is a best fit for your family, get that amount of money written down. It can be an annual, like what is it going to cost me in 2022? It could be what is it going to cost us in the next 3 years, the next 5 years. You may not know that far out because your child may start being remediated. It may go quicker than you think. So think about 2022. What in the next 12 months do I need to do to provide what my child needs? And then work backwards. Figure out what is that dollar amount, and then what do we do as a family? Do we, I've got friends that redo old, refurbish old furniture into new furniture, like other things, right? Like they completely remodel it. There's different ways. So if you sit down and really kind of think about your strengths and how you can do those things, I know at first it feels overwhelming, right? Like you're just trying to figure out how to remediate your child. And now on top of that, you have to figure out how to pay for it. But again, the great news is your child can be remediated. Your child can be remediated. And you can do this. So take a little time, figure out what's available. And, if you look and you're like, this is not the road I want to go on, that's okay. Maybe how you invest in remediation is, I've got lots of family and friends that have gone back to get training to be an OG tutor or some type of remediation tutor for reading, specifically trained for dyslexics. They either, one, use that training to become a tutor to supplement their income and to pay for these things, or they are doing some type of co-op or not private school, a co-op or a homeschool where they're teaching their own child, or they're teaching kids in like a pod and like a group, and they're taking turns teaching. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. And there's a lot of different ways it can look. So spending some time as a family, deciding what you want your child's education to look like, that is invaluable. And you are going to possibly have to revisit this several times to really think it through. Our daughter is in 5th grade getting ready for middle school, and we're exploring those same things. What do we want school to look like? What do we want it to look like for her? What do we want offerings to look like as far as electives? Where do we want her challenged? What do we want homework to look like? And we've had the conversation of there's a couple of schools where we could do a hybrid model of homeschool. Or do we have the bandwidth for that, right? So there's a lot of different things to look at. But you know what? I know you got this. You got this. You just need to take it day by day and take some time to think out what you want it to look like. Then make some notes as to what is available for you, what is within your bandwidth, which means, are you willing to travel? Are you willing to relocate? Do you have other children in the mix that you have to figure out about? There's a lot of factors. I get that. I do. But you have to start somewhere. So the first place to start is deciding what your child's needs are, then deciding what is available in your location or somewhere you're willing to relocate, and then looking at what is that going to cost for 2022. And then how are we going to make that affordable for our family? Or maybe you're looking at several options, and then you're determining what you want that education to look like. And if you think about the last episode, episode 94, I shared with you that if you've met one dyslexic, you've met one dyslexic. So as you think about your own personal journey and planning that vacation of education, if you will, like what is it going to look like? How are we going to get there? What's our destination? Everybody's on a similar path, if you will. Like we're all here together. We're all part of this community, but we're all going to get to the destination a little bit different. And that's okay. You have to do what's best for you and your family. And you're going to have to spend some time thinking about what that looks like. You have the opportunity to dream about what that looks like. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. It does feel overwhelming at the beginning, but you just have to pull it together and you have to figure out what is the next step. And I just laid them out for you. I just told you exactly what to do. So spend some time. Block off some time on your calendar. If that means that you're sitting, over a weekend with your spouse or your significant other, or maybe by yourself, and you're thinking through these things and you're making notes in your journal. I make lists. I do pros and cons list a lot. You might want to do that. But at the end of the day, you have to make some real decisions on what you're doing next. But I know you can. And if you need me, I'm available. We have lots of resources on our website at dyslexiamomlife.com about dyslexia. We have lots of podcast episodes. If you need me, reach out, send me a DM on Instagram, email me at nicole@dyslexiamomlife.com if you just want to bounce something off or have a conversation. And I challenged the moms out there last episode. I'm going to do it again this episode, which is 1 in 5 are dyslexic. So there's someone in your community, either a friend you know about or one you don't. Share an episode that resonated with you. Or if you're listening to something, maybe it's this episode and you're going, oh, I know someone that needs this. Share it with them. There's a share button on every podcast player that you'll run across. Share it out. You can share it through a text message, through an email. Maybe you're not really sure who needs it. So you can just share it to a Facebook message. You can tag me if you want to. I'm Dyslexia Mom Life on all the platforms, all the social platforms. You don't have to tag me. I'm fine with that. But just getting the information out there, for us to get the information out there to moms so that we can continue to grow our community and continue to serve and give back to moms. We know you're overwhelmed. We know you're overworked. We know that there are so many things that you're doing that no one sees. I get that. I've been there. I am there. So I am sure there is someone, 1 in 5, who would need or want to see or hear that information. And it gives you the opportunity to not be so alone. Someone in your bigger community, a family member, a friend from college, somebody reached out to me the other day that I worked with, probably 8 years ago. And, that gives you also just another person in your own network within your own tribe. So I appreciate you being here today. And if you're stuck with me through this longer episode, I appreciate it. I wanted to let you know that you can afford and you absolutely must remediate your child with dyslexia, because we want our children to have all the opportunities and to be able to pursue their dreams. And that's the way that they do it. So thanks again for being here, and I look forward to sharing more information with you soon. All right, go out and have a great week. And remember, you've got this.